Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Ask Cindy. If it's your first time tuning in, Ask Cindy is our Tuesday show where we talk about the challenges, the questions, the thoughts that entrepreneurs, founders, business leaders, and wannabe entrepreneurs have in their journey of entrepreneurship. My name is Cindy Burdett. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called All Care. We provide freelancers, gig workers, small businesses, and startups access to employee benefits through our digital membership platform so that they can focus on what they do best, which is running their businesses. On the other hand, All Care takes care of your employees and your workers' benefits needs. Okay. So, again, welcome to today's episode. I'm actually calling in all the way from Singapore. I'm here to do a number of meetings, visit some investor friends, catch up on the latest in the insurtech industry. And but All Care's AskCindy is very important, so we're gonna do an episode, and it's our season ender today. And what better way to end the season than to talk about one of the most important things that we need to be doing in this period right now. It's midpoint of 2022, and what you should be doing is doing your mid-year strategic planning, right? And so today's topic is actually maximizing your business's mid-year plans. Okay. Let me just turn off our virtual office space. I don't know if you know Gather Town, but we're in Gather Town and everyone's trying to ring me. Okay, so so let's get on to the topic. This afternoon we are going to talk about strategic mid-year, and I think one of the basic questions that we need to be asking ourselves is, why is it important to do a mid-year plan? So me and our team at All Care, we just finished doing our mid-year strat plan and recalibration of KPIs, and I kid you not, it's one of the funnest but also the most stretching last, 3-4 weeks for everybody in the team, especially our new managers, right? We're introducing them to the new frameworks, we're introducing them to the visioning, we're introducing them to new models. I would say the types of discussion that we have as a team, as a management team, is obviously can be a little bit pressure filled, can be a little bit tension filled, but there are so many good things that come out of a good debate, right? And so that was a great experience for us, and I just want to encourage everybody to make sure that you allot time for your week. Wow, ang dami. Sorry, that was coffee. Okay, to allot time in your mid-year this year to talk about your strategies going into the second half of the year. Is it important? Absolutely. Can you get away through the year? Can you go forward for the rest of the year without doing a mid-year strat plan? Absolutely. Like, what do you lose out when you don't do a mid-year strat plan? Number one, if you set out things, objectives, goals at the start of the year, and you don't do a mid-year, you lose out on an opportunity to recalibrate, to do a 6-month review of how you've been doing, and are you successful in the things that you set out to do? Are the strategies you are supposed to be using effective to what you want to accomplish? You don't necessarily have to wait 6 months before you do that check-in, right? You can do quarterly. But the midpoint, I feel personally, is a great point to just do an acid test of where you're at. I think 1 quarter is too short and 3-4 quarters are too long, right? So after 2 quarters, reviewing your strategy, reviewing your objectives and your metrics sounds just about right. The other thing that you lose out on is taking advantage of the people's collective experiences, shared experience and shared knowledge for the past 6 months, and use that to recalibrate your strategies, your objectives going forward. What you set out to do at the beginning of the year may not be what you need to do come midpoint, right? And when you don't do a mid-year strat plan, you lose out on that focused session, that relentless session where everybody's just looking at the second half of the year to recalibrate both strategy and objectives. I'm still lisping from my tooth extraction. But anyway, can you do away with no mid-year strat planning? Absolutely. Right? But the topic today is maximizing your mid-year, and one of the things that you can do that is by taking a pause, looking at your strategies and your objectives, and recalibrating in accordance to that. So something that I wanted to share and get out of my chest before we take on the questions that our folks sent in for today's episode. Okay, so without further ado, why am I lisping? Why am I stuttering? Anyway, it's probably, we arrived today, so it's probably the flight, the hassle of the commute. But anyway, let's go and get on with it. First question, what are the things that we should prepare prior to our mid-year business planning? Great question. Okay, it's I did a workshop a few weeks ago on how to prepare and how to execute a productive and effective mid-year strat plan, right? And one of the things I heavily emphasized in that session is the time to prepare. One of the things that is key to a successful mid-year planning is having enough time to analyze data. So number one, having enough access to data. Number two, knowing the data that you need to be looking at and making the right correlations, which means you need enough time to really study where you've been, right? Your January to June, early mid-June should have been time to really collect information on what you guys are doing, whether the strategies and the objectives are effective. And so you need access to that data, and you need to be looking very, very thoroughly into that data. And so you need time to prepare. You need time to glean insights. You need time to think about what those insights and analysis mean to you, to your department, to your team, and to your company. So that's probably one of the most important things that you can do. I go into a lot of mid-year strat plannings for our clients, from BT partners, friends that ask me to consult and help them run their workshops. And oftentimes their focus is on ideation, right? Like, what should we do next half? And honestly, that for me is the easiest thing to do when you know where you've been, right? So if you have the insights, if you have the data, and you have the analysis, it's almost going to be common sense what you want to do second half of the year. But if you don't have that access to data, you don't have access to the information, ideas are a dime a dozen. So you're going to have ideas that may or may not necessarily be effective. So by doing a recalibration, by doing a look into your past 6 months, you are lowering the risk of making mistakes or repeating mistakes moving forward. And last but not the least, I would say one of the keys to prepare for a good mid-year strat planning session is really getting everybody on the same page. Agree on a vision, agree on the objectives of the meeting, agree on the format of the session, agree on the flow and the content and the time, and have a program ready. I've seen companies where their strat plan is 2-3 days long, but everybody only has 15 minutes to present. What can be done in 15 minutes, right? You can't even question and create and have a engaging debate and discussion on what's being presented in 15 and 30 minutes, right? So, just be conscious of what it is that you're really trying to do. Is this really an activity to strategize, or this is repertorial and performance only? Meaning you need to be able to say that you did it, right? And if everybody's on the same page with that, I think you're set to have a great mid-year strat plan. So I hope that's helpful. Okay. How many days should we set aside for mid-year review and planning? Would you recommend outsourcing facilitators? So let's take that. Depending on how large the organization is, how complex the organization and its market dynamics, its go-to-market, for example, the structure of how it operates, I would say that heavily impacts how much time you need to prepare, right? For preparation, I would say at least 2 to 3 weeks before your scheduled mid-year planning would be a good period, right? Because you don't want to spend too much time because you won't cover the data needed. So if it was anywhere like 4-5 weeks, you're only looking at Q1 data, and that doesn't make sense. So I would say anywhere from 2 weeks would be the ideal review period, right, for your analysis and data gathering. including your insights generation. And then I would say 2 days at most for your strat planning. Would I recommend outsourcing facilitators? It heavily depends on what the objective of the session is, right? If it's really to just report on what you've done the past 6 months and what you're going to do next 6 months, maybe you don't necessarily need a facilitator. But if you feel that it's an opportunity to do some leadership training, some keynote speaking, and to just impart and equip your managers and leaders at that point, because again, that's one of the few times that they'll be completely they're gathered and completely focused together, right? So it might make sense for you to do some leadership development right there. And if that's the case, then yes, I would outsource facilitators, and I would outsource that specific part of the program to facilitators and professional trainers, right? I know a few. If you want me to make some recommendations, hit me in the chat, message me on LinkedIn or on Facebook. I'd be happy to give recommendations. Okay, here's another one. At what point should I consider recalibrating my metrics on reassessing my business goals? Really, really good question. I think when we say recalibrate, it's a matter of what is the forecast, what is your run rate, like what has been your rate for the past 6 months, right? And given the things that you are going to do, given your market dynamics, your environmental factors, internal factors, is it still possible to get your original metrics? And ideally, you don't change that, right? Ideally, because those are the numbers you commit to your investors. Those are the numbers that you set out at the beginning of the year. You commit those numbers to partners, etc. But to be realistic, right, there's a lot of things that happen within a period that we don't see coming. And sometimes those really affect our forecast. And so if that's the case, right, usually we do best case scenario, most probable scenario, and then worst case scenario, right? And I guess in a way, what you're really changing is your most probable scenario, right? Ideally, you're still thinking about ideas to get the BHAG or the best case scenario, but realistically speaking, this is what you really can do given the budget, given the time constraint, given the market dynamics, economic movement, etc. So that's the only time I would think it would be okay to change your metrics or your goals. And at the same time, I think that when you do make the change, it has to be coming from a logical perspective. Like when you present this to your investors, to your partners, to your principals, it needs to make sense. They need to see it just like you did. And I think it needs to be that they see they need to see a conscious effort that you're still trying to hit the original target. Before you say, I surrender, white flag, we're going to change the metrics, right? So for example, initial target was a certain number and you were going to get there by hiring 10 more people. Stuff happened, market stuff happened, uncontrollable events happened like the war, gas prices, what have you, right? If it's affecting your business. And then all of a sudden at mid-year, you now need to hire 30 people to get that number. Budget-wise, time to onboard, time to hire, recruit, etc. All things considered, it's almost impossible to do 30, right? So what you're going to do is find that middle ground. So as long as you can back that up, why you're making the change in your metrics or changing your business goals, I think it's okay. At the end of the day, I belong to the camp that believe businesses should only show to investors and principals and other partners what they think is doable, not what their imagination thinks is doable, right? Because at the end of the day, I don't want to be in a position where they're coming to collect those promises you knew you could never hit in the first place. So yeah, I know I rambled a little bit, but I hope that was helpful. Okay. If the review reveals that we're not hitting our financial targets, how do you implement stronger corrective actions? Really good question. In the workshop that I ran a few weeks ago, I talked about the growth flywheel, right? And there are certain things that help make the flywheel move faster and help the flywheel move slower. Depending on what's really happening in your business, it is not a straightforward answer, right? You really need to analyze what's happening in the business. Are you not hitting your financial targets because your cost is too high, meaning you're operating inefficiently? You are quite bloated in your manpower, and so those are ways to also fix your financial position, right? Alternatively, you can also make the flywheel, the growth flywheel, go faster. And ways to do that would include adding force into marketing, adding force into sales, or reducing friction in customer acquisition, reducing friction in interdepartmental collaboration, in reducing friction in product, user experience, a lot of things. And so there's really no one way to answer how to hit your financial targets. It's just that, do you know what's causing or preventing you from hitting your targets? And that's why that review period is super critical, because that's where you want to play investigative journalism. That's where you want to play Detective Conan and figure out what's causing you to not hit your targets. Like, is it lack of manpower? Is it a sucky product? Is it marketing? You're just not spending enough. And so all of your corrective actions will largely be based on what your investigation tells you. So it's very important before you go into planning and make commitments and promises about corrective actions, you do know for a fact where those inefficiencies are coming from. Okay. Okay, I think this is the last question. How do you communicate with investors that the company did not hit its target for the first half of the year? It's hard, right? I think we have to acknowledge that it's going to be a very hard conversation. And this is where I think so there's a number of factors, right? If you selected investors that you know are in it to help you grow, to help you achieve what you're destined and meant to achieve, then being honest and being vulnerable and telling them what happened and giving them your analysis and even your corrective actions, right, is a little bit easier because you know they're rooting for you. If you found investors that are just there for the money to make a quick buck, want to flip the investment a year, 2 years, then that's a little bit of a harder conversation, because you're essentially telling them they're gonna make their money a little later than they were hoping to, right? So that, I guess, would establish the methodology. For All Care, most of our investors are partners. We believe in them, that they are there rooting us, they are there to support us. They want nothing but the best for us to achieve the growth that we are capable of in the shortest amount of time. And so what usually happens is we present them what's there. We present the truth. We show them why we only got to this point. What did we feel was lacking? What did our investigation led us to? And at the same time, before they say much about our non-performance, we also show them what we think we should be doing moving forward, right? And so that shows the investors' proactiveness. That shows the investors that we recognize there are areas we can improve, and here are the ways to mitigate those. And it shows the investors' good faith. Right? From our end, we're not happy. It shows them that we're not happy where we're at, and we want to do better. I don't think there's one way of doing it, but the other day I was talking to 500 startups, and it was an interesting thing they said. It's better to know things ahead of time before they're absolutely a dead problem, because it's easier to solve them then. And I absolutely agree, right? When you come to your investors, when everything is super desperate already, the situation is too exacerbated, it's hard for them to do anything. It's hard for them to intervene and change the course of where the startup or the company is going. But if you have the relationship with your investors and you cultivate that, and you tell them and you give them a heads up early on that you're struggling with something, you might be surprised at the extent of what they're willing to do to help you get out of it or get ahead of it, right? So I wouldn't dilly-dally. I mean, just, as Ryan Holiday says, what do you call this? What is that book that he wrote? Obstacle is the way, right? So it's just what you need to do. So just get it done. So I hope those things are helpful. I really hope, to the entrepreneurs listening and to the business leaders listening, that you don't take this midpoint lightly. This year, so many things have happened. You still have the halo effects of the pandemic. You have a war raging in Russia and Ukraine. You have oil prices going left and right. You have the economic instability, the political climate. Like, everything is happening all at the same time in every facet, right? And all of these things affect a business. And so I wouldn't take it lightly that you have an opportunity to sit down, stop, reflect, analyze, and recalibrate for where you want to go, given everything that's happening around. This season was designed for that, and I really do hope that as leaders, you would champion that pause and allow your employees to participate in that entire exercise. So I hope that quick session was helpful. Again, this is the season ender for All Care AskCindy Season 2. Please stay tuned for our upcoming, we're planning for our upcoming season. Make sure you follow us on all our social media channels, on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, Kumu, and TikTok. We're also now on TikTok. Can you believe it? And stay tuned on the topics that we are planning for. And if you have topics that you think are worthwhile discussing, please message us in those platforms as well. I want to thank everybody for making time to watch this episode and for being with us this entire second season. And like me, I hope you're looking forward to the next season.